Now,
Good morning, everyone. We are all celebrating the International Yoga Day on June 21st, and to commemorate this auspicious occasion worldwide, we have Paul Rodney Tanner today and Vivek and Dinesh from Overseas Volunteers for Better India. To give you a brief introduction of Paul, he has been doing some incredible work worldwide. He's a spiritual guide. He's a raw food chef, a public speaker, and a numerologist, to say the least. He is the director and co-founder of Food for Life Global and founder of Food Yogi. So, Paul, you consider yourself to be a yogi. So what does it really means? I mean, if you can give us some insight about your yogic way of life and how did you happen to be a yogi in the first place?
Well, thank you for the introduction, Sumanjana. Well, my background is at the age of 19, I actually became a monk, so a real yogi. Living in an
Wow.
ashram, I shaved my head, sleeping
At
on
the
the
age of
floor.
19, so did you like run away from home or something?
No, I was a spiritual seeker, so
And,
I came across the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, and it
mhm,
felt right to me. I was a vegetarian at the time, so I
mhm.
decided to join an ashram, shave my head, sleeping on the floor, no bed for the next 14 years, not even a pillow, eating, regulated meals, getting up at 3 in the morning, doing prayers, 2 hours of meditation. And part of my training as a monk
Mm,
was to learn how to cook and distribute food to the poor people. So volunteers of Food for Life, Hare Krishna Food for Life. So that
mhm,
inspired me, to learn more about this ancient Vedic culture of hospitality. And
mhm.
the more I dug deep into that, I realized that there was more to this food distribution than what you would see externally. There was a deep philosophy, a deep, very meaningful intention behind this program of Food for Life. And the more I discovered that, the more I became inspired to, start my own program. And so as a monk, I learned early on that service is the the song of the soul. It's our innate characteristic. Everything has a dharma or an innate characteristic, just like
Mhm.
sugar. Its innate characteristic or its dharma is sweetness, and water is
Mhm.
liquidity. Fire is heat and light. It's just you can't separate the quality from the actual thing. So the innate
Like the
quality
different
or the
elements
dharma of
from
the
the
soul.
nature coming together.
I beg your pardon?
I was saying like the different elements of nature coming together and having some kind of cohesive manifestation.
Well, it's what I was suggesting is that the innate quality of the soul is service, is devotional service or unconditional service. And
Mm-hmm.
so in yoga, what we learn in yoga, the yoga tradition, is that the meaning of yoga is to connect. It comes from the root Sanskrit word yuj, which means to unite.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are in a in yoga, practicing yoga fully, then we have this sense of unity in ourself, mind, body, spirit working together, and we
Mm-hmm.
also have a sense of unity with each individual person, individual soul in the world. We feel united, connected on a spiritual level, energetically connected, and of course, the root of that connection is our connection with God, the personified God.
Mm-hmm.
So
You said
this
you were
really
19 when you had this spiritual calling that inspired you to go out and seek what is lying there. So you were, where were you at that point? I heard you were born and raised in Australia.
the suburbs of Sydney, and I was just a regular boy playing sport, um, just doing things that boys do, nothing different. However, I was
Mhm.
always a little bit more philosophical than your regular kid. So at the age of 14, 15, I actually got interested in astronomy, which was quite unusual back then, very different from anyone that I was hanging around with. And I
Mhm.
would actually stay up all night just studying the stars. Literally, I'd
Mhm.
have a sleeping bag and I'd put the sleeping bag on top of the car and I'd lay on top of the car and look at the stars and study them and
Mhm.
look for and watch for like meteor showers and so on. And this uh, experience led me to question there's got to be an intelligence behind this universe. It's incredible. I mean, we're so small. I started to learn about the distances of, the closest star to us is, back then I think it was understood to be Beta Centauri, which is 4.3 light years away. And of course, that means light traveling 300,000 kilometers an hour for the next 4.3 years before it reaches us. So that's the closest star. So these distances astounded me, and
Mhm.
I started to question
I
and
know.
wonder what
Pretty
is behind them.
astounding to
Well, I mean, so
imagine
this is
the
yeah, maybe it's from a past
everybody's
life. This
talking
is a
about the
fifth
full
doing.
magnanimity.
Sorry, you cut off there.
Did
What did you?
you, Paul, I'm very curious to know. So, after you had all these realizations, I mean, obviously, the universe and the working of the world and that whole spiritual calling, did you, like, you traveled to India, is it?
Well, as I hadn't traveled anywhere until when I became a monk, I had never left the country, and then at the age of 21, I
Mm-hmm.
got the opportunity to 22. I got the opportunity to travel to India as a monk. It
Mm-hmm.
was my first experience in 1985, and that was amazing to go to the ancient holy places like Vrindavan
Mm-hmm.
and to see the simplicity, the purity of that town, and
Mm-hmm.
how everyone was very much focused on Krishna and Krishna and Radha were very much part of their life. People would greet you not with a hello, but Radhe Radhe, and it
Mm-hmm.
was just part of part of their being, the way of life. And so this was really amazing for me to see that the simplicity, the purity of that livelihood,
Hmm.
and
So is it
that was in
in
1985.
Vrindavan that you started your yoga training?
Well, the training began when I was living in the ashram in the mountains of Sydney. As I said, I was a monk and I was being trained to live very simply and to study the ancient yoga scriptures like the Bhagavad Gita. And going to India, however, just sort of solidified those realizations, that information that I'd learned, because I started to see the yoga life in practice in its traditional environment. So that was really, really beautiful for me. That what I was learning was not simply something book knowledge, but it was practical. It was a very ancient tradition.
Hmm. So that kind of brought in a sort of transformation in you emotionally and physically and in your holistic way of life.
Yeah, well, it convinced me more. It sort of fed my conviction. I was already convinced and very enthusiastic, but once I saw this ancient tradition coming to life and seeing that this is not something new, this was thousands and thousands of years old, I became much more committed, convinced, and inspired to continue my yoga practice.
Interesting. So, Paul, we have Vivek and Dinesh here with us, who are from Overseas Volunteers for Better India, an organization which is extremely connected with grassroots activism all over the world. I mean, they have contributed in many ways towards growth and development in India. And we do have volunteers in US and Europe, everywhere in the world. So Vivek, could you tell us a little bit about the works of Overseas Volunteers for Better India? especially in relations with the International Day of Yoga on June 21st that's coming up, how you're contributing or changing lives worldwide. Vivek.
Thank you, Somanjana ji. Nice to have Paul with us here today. So OVBI is Overseas Volunteer for Better India, and we are nothing but the Indians abroad who cares for a better India. We are doctors, students, engineers, volunteers, business owners, and everyday citizens, coming together for the betterment of India, trying to bring that change in India that we always would like to see, that this is how it should be, or this is the new projects we should work on, things like that. So in the past, I'm
Had
sure.
some lofty visions of India, like from the ancient time, then how the modern India should look like, right? So you guys have all these projects to build the nation.
Yes, exactly. So there are many initiatives that OBVI has taken in the past, Project Udan, Project Ujas, and then Vote for Better India, then in fact School of Good Governance, stuff like that. But the entire new series of Yogathon that is been going on with OBVI is basically to give a perspective to everyone that yoga is one of India's biggest gifts to the world, and as June 21st has been nominated by the United Nations as International Yoga Day, so OVBI is coming out in solidarity with other organizations like Patanjali Yogpeeth, Art of Living,
Mm-hmm.
Isha Kriya, and some other organizations. In fact, Indian embassies and Consulate General of India in New York and DC, and organizing this yogathon or yoga events in 100 plus cities across the US. And
Right. I'm totally aware of what's going on in San Francisco Bay Area. The Consulate General Ambassador Venkatesh and Ashok, he's hosting an event. We are having, myriads of different events, like 10 different events in other cities in the Bay Area as well. So it's pretty fascinating to see that how the global audience is coming together and celebrating the International Day of Yoga. So Vivek, do you have any questions for Paul? I mean, Paul
yeah,
is a perfect example of somebody coming from a different part of the world who kind of, reconnected with himself and the ancient roots of India and became a yogi.
right, right. So I do have questions for before I finish off. I just want to let you know that since yoga, as Paul mentioned, is union in Sanskrit, so I think the way international audience is looking at yoga is definitely uniting all of us, and I really have hopes that yoga would impact the way of life, the way we live our lives. So, Paul, it's pleasure having you here with us today. Uh,
Vivek, a quick interruption. So Manjana ji, can you turn off your video? I guess,
Yeah, I did already.
okay.
Yeah.
yeah.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Vivek.
Yeah. So Paul, nice to have you with us today. And I would just go with some questions to understand what are the
Thank you.
things that you are working with currently. And let me come first to Food for Life Global. So Food for Life Global is, as we know, affiliate who is now serving 1.5 million meals a day or even more, and it's across the world in 60 nations. So, would you please tell us what inspired you to start Food for Life Global, and what are the fundamental core beliefs of Food for Life?
Thank you very much, Vivek. So, as I mentioned to Manjana, that my first service as a monk was actually preparing food in the kitchen and feeding people. And so early on, that inspired me so much that I wanted to start my own Food for Life program. Food for Life had only had sort of started in 1974. We give that as the official year, but it very organically started. It started when Swami Prabhupada, the founder and acharya of ISKCON, he saw some children fighting with dogs over scraps of food behind the temple in West Bengal. And he told his students, this should never happen, because wherever the temple is, that means the father is present, the mother is present, the children should not go hungry. So then he said something very profound, very, very powerful. He says, nowhere within 10 miles of our temple should anyone ever go hungry. So that inspired the yoga students then to start a food relief program. At that time it was not called Food for Life, it was just a food relief program from the temple. So that organically developed around the world in various ISKCON centers. And then around 1979 there was the first modern version of Food for Life. 1980 it officially became established, and it was a type of soup kitchen where in Sydney, Australia, the monks would serve food behind the temple from a kitchen to the homeless people. So I joined the temple in 1983, and so one of my early services was Food for Life, serving that food to the homeless people. Then around 1986 I started my own program feeding students at the University of Sydney, and it was more of a combination of feeding, students that couldn't afford to eat healthy, and also teaching them about healthy eating and so on. Because back in those days there was lack of information about a healthy diet. So I did that, and then that led me to investigate more about the Vedic culture of hospitality, the meaning behind Food for Life. What was the deep spiritual meaning behind this activity? It's not simply feeding people. It's more of a way to express our love for someone, and this idea of unity, of equality in action. Because when you serve someone food, you're essentially saying in action that I love you, I respect you, here's some food. So that became a very important part of my motivation as I started to develop and study the culture, the Vedic culture of hospitality, spiritual hospitality. So around 1990 I created a Food for Life newsletter. 91 it went international, and I'll distribute this newsletter to various Food for Life projects around the world. And at that time Food for Life was present in Australia, in various cities in America, in some cities throughout Europe, but it was still very small. And then in 1993, Mukunda Goswami, who was at that time overseeing the development of Food for Life around the world, he asked me to get involved and help him to establish a headquarters, and we would call this headquarters Food for Life Global. And he says the purpose of this headquarters would be to establish standards, establish systems of operations, to formalize it, to systematize it so that we had a type of franchise model, and to expand it around the world. So in 1993 I actually wrote the first Food for Life training manual, which included a lot of information on these topics of, how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, what to do, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And so in 1994, the following year...
from 1993, so you have been all over the world doing this, feeding people. I mean, what are some of the places that you go to, and what are these kind of places?
Yeah, that's actually about my next question. After Paul just about to finish the first one.
Yeah, I'll just finish this. Sorry, Samanj, I'll just finish what I was saying. So in 1994, we established the first official Food for Life headquarters, which was called Food for Life Global. Up until that point, literally 20 years, the project had just developed organically around the world. And so we established, it was officially registered in 95, but started in 94. And Food for Life Global then became the formal headquarters, and we started to expand the project all over the world. So now we have projects in more than 60 countries, and we're distributing between 1.5 and 2 million meals every day.
Wonderful.
So yeah, as far as my travels are concerned, I personally visited 66 countries, helped to train and inspire volunteers to start their own program. Mm-hmm. And I've visited many of those. I've actually visited many of the world's major disaster areas. Like, for example, when the tsunami hit in Japan, I was there like a week later organizing a food relief program in very close to the area where the disaster hit, and people had taken shelter in community halls and basketball courts and so on, and we were feeding people. Mm-hmm. I've also went in 2004, 2005, the Boxing Day tsunami that hit Southeast Asia. I was there in Sri Lanka, and we had 50 volunteers from around the world, and we set up kitchens. Actually, we set up camps where we were feeding people, cooking food on firewood, and distributing the food to the various, refugee camps around the island. It was very logistically challenging, but somehow or other we did it. We served about 350,000 vegan meals during that time, and many others, many war zones and so on. I've been to a lot of different places.
So,
Excellent. Vivek, in fact, I'm curious to know, this goes to both you and Paul. Like Paul mentioned that, all this learning that he went through for so many years, and then he put some in action. So that talks about karma yoga, right?
right.
So how this whole aspect, we know that we have the bhakti yoga, the devotion, and then we have the karma yoga, the action, and we also have the gyan yoga, seeking the knowledge. So how this particular component of karma yoga has impacted your life, and what are some of the actions that you're taking? So this goes to both Paul and Vivek. Paul.
Well, yeah. So, karma yoga is, of course, the real karma yoga. The highest form of karma yoga is when you're acting, but in devotion. Your actions are actually in connection with your relationship with the divine, with God. Because it's one thing to act according to your dharma. For example, if you're a farmer, you're growing vegetables because that's what you're good at doing. Or if you're a banker or a financial man or a businessman, you're good at making money, so that's fine. And you can do that, and that's your material dharma. But what makes it spiritual or purifies that activity is when you connect that to service to God, and so that's the real highest form of karma yoga. So with Food for Life, we are a food relief organization essentially, but our objective is much more higher than that. It's much more spiritual than that, because our main message is uniting the world through pure food. And our mission statement is to create peace and prosperity in the world through the liberal distribution of pure plant-based meals prepared with loving intentions. So this is how we separate ourselves from the other food relief organizations, and there are literally hundreds of them around the world, and they're all doing wonderful stuff. But what's distinguishing Food for Life Global from these is that our intention is to use pure food, which is prepared with loving intention, to create this sense of unity, to really address the real root cause of all the problems in the world, which is spiritual inequality. Now, materially, we can never be perfectly equal because we all have different circumstances. A man can't have a baby. A woman can't do so many things that a man can do. That's just the fact. But spiritually, we are equal because we're all energetically coming from the same source. We're all coming from one, the spark of God's splendor, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita. So it's this sense of spiritual inequality, which is causing all of the problems in the world, the disparity, the inequitable distribution of resources, and so on. So our focus is addressing this root cause through the most pure, most fundamental action of sharing pure food, because that's something which is universally accepted. Food is the great communicator, the great uniter. It is the most the most fundamental thing that we all do every day is eat food and share food. So we're taking that most fundamental, basic necessity of life and taking it to the most pure, highest spiritual level by sharing it liberally, indiscriminately, with pure intention, and in this way creating a sense of unity in the world. And we believe that is really the most effective way to solve the world problems.
Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, you pointed out very important and very nice thing, Samanjana ji, that this is really a karma yoga. Yeah, so I think that the more bhakti leads to more gyan, leads to more karma, and it's all linked together. And
So what's your karma, Vivek?
Food is something which is like at the lowest level of the hierarchical model, which everyone needs basically. It's something which is like the most fundamental basic thing that that one has, that is a need. So I think a selfless service and devotion that Food for Life Global has in his mission, and spreading that love and uniting everyone by providing them the most fundamental necessity in this world, that is food, is wonderful. Like I'm amazed the way the geographical spread and the amount of meals they are serving per day, about 2 million meals a day across the world. So my question to Paul would be that I'm sure this is a huge organization, and I mean, since the huge amount of work that you guys are doing, you would have a lot of volunteers, I would say, who comes in and pitches in, and who cooks and stuff like that. So can you give us some examples from different kitchens around the world, where how many people are involved globally in this effort, how many are volunteers, and what are some of these aspects?
Well, we are a volunteer-based organization, Vivek. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we're present in over 60 countries, so we have thousands and thousands of volunteers. But this situation, one kitchen alone may serve 60, 65,000 meals, which is, incredible, one day. And some of these kitchens aren't very big, but they're very efficiently run, very sophisticated equipment and very sophisticated and systems in place. And because of that, the logistics involved, we do need to employ people to make sure things run smoothly. So we have paid drivers, we have security guards and so on, because we need to make sure this is run very professionally.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these, all of these midday meal programs in India have a partnership with the Indian government, and they actually sponsor up to half of the meals are sponsored by the government, and so we have certain standards to comply to. So we run them like a real business, and so we have a lot of paid staff on those projects. But even so, what is really amazing about these projects is still the average cost of one meal is around 10 to 15 cents, which is astonishing. And this is including distribution, preparation, security, transportation, petrol, everything. And it's still only around 15 cents a meal, a complete meal, which is astonishing. I mean, I don't think there's any other organization that can boast that sort of efficiency. And so, you have a very high level of programs like that, but then we have lots of other programs which are run purely 100% voluntarily in other parts of the world. They're a lot smaller, but they're usually run by monks or members of the community who come in and volunteer a few hours a week or so on, and they help serve the meals or prepare the meals.
Mm-hmm. Most recently, Paul, we had this extremely disastrous earthquake in Nepal. And I know both Overseas Volunteers for Better India and Food for Life Global, you have your volunteers were there in Nepal. Vivek, can you just tell us a little about what Overseas Volunteers for Better India volunteers are doing in Nepal, and then I'll come to Paul about, of course, feeding those people.
Yeah, I think I would like to tell that Overseas Volunteer for Better India has worked very closely with some of the organizations to assist them who are basically on ground and working in Nepal. And for example, like Food for Life is extremely fast and quick in response because they, I think, have a local Food for Life chapter. Correct me, Paul, but you can go a little bit in more detail of what are the rescue and relief efforts, or serving the meals, and I think all of these meals are cooked right under the right outside, and being fed to thousands of people over there.
Yeah, exactly, Vivek. We already had a team in Nepal serving meals. We doing a midday meal program actually, so they would go to the schools every day and provide a meal to various schools which have been selected by the local government as schools made up of children underprivileged children, children in need. So that was going on already. And when the earthquake hit, the volunteers simply adjusted their focus and immediately responded. The next day, we were serving meals on the 26th of April. I think the 25th was when the earthquake hit. The 26th, we were feeding people, survivors. Not only that, we brought in volunteers from India, medical experts and so on. We set up little medical camps.
Mm-hmm.
So we're providing medical relief as well as providing hot food, which was khichdi, which, as you know, is a combination of beans, rice, and vegetables. It's a very nutritious, very wholesome meal.
Mm-hmm.
And we're providing that along with water, medical care, and even more recently we've also been providing blankets and clothing, used clothing, which was donated by another organization. We were distributing them. Yeah. We're also working with other organizations like the Thai, it's a youth group in Thailand actually, that they've come together. It's called the Thai-based Myanmar-born Gorkha Youth Association. They've been very helpful in providing volunteer services, helping us distribute the meals and carry equipment and so on. So yeah, we're good at that. We're good at responding very quickly. And in fact, that's something which is missed by a lot of the media, is that Food for Life Global and its affiliates has been a first responder in some of the major disasters in the last 20 years. For example, even the great tsunami of 2005.
The Katrina.
We literally. The Katrina too.
Yeah,
2005 was a big disaster. But 2005, I think it was Boxing Day, so the 26th of December 2004. We actually were serving people the next day, the same day, that same afternoon. We were serving people on the beach. Our Food for Life operation in Chennai, South India, was feeding people the very same day. And then within 2 weeks, Food for Life affiliates were serving food. And we were the only organization for a very long time serving actually hot prepared meals. What happens usually in these emergencies is that the UN or other organizations will have these emergency packages, which would be like crackers and peanut butter and jam and whatever it is. And when they distribute these to the local people, they're so unfamiliar with that food, they can't even really associate with it. So they're a little bit confused. But when we come in and we serve them hot khichdi, hot bean stew, then they're very excited and happy and they appreciate it. So we've been a first responder in most of the world's major disasters in the last 20 years.
Right. So as you mentioned, Food for Life Global is one of the first responder in major events, and I've heard a little bit about that. Food for Life volunteers also risk their life in some war-torn countries, for let's say Chechnya, Bosnia, and 90s, where the civil situation wasn't very good in terms of war-torn countries, and Food for Life went in there, risked their lives, but tried to serve a lot of people, unite them through food.
Yeah, there's been a couple of incidents like that. For example, in Chechnya, as you mentioned, in Chechnya, it was a very, very dangerous situation. I actually visited the Food for Life team during the middle of the war, and it was very difficult to get in. And they were there for 2 years. There was, I think, about 12 volunteers. Most of them were from Moscow and St. Petersburg, professional people, bankers, doctors, accountants, and so on. And they volunteered their time, risked their lives to prepare meals. And they'd taken over an abandoned kindergarten, and they used the kitchen in the kindergarten, and they were preparing a type of porridge. They were making fresh bread and also serving a type of tea every day. And they would prepare the meals, put it in containers, take it in an old ambulance vehicle around the city, distribute it at certain points. Sometimes people would come to the kitchen. And it was extremely dangerous. They tell me one story one time that the Russians were actually in the courtyard. The Chechens were in the courtyard of the school fighting with the Russians who happened, their base was just behind the school. And so there were literally bullets flying over the building they were in, and many of the bullets went through the windows, and the volunteers were laying on the floor just praying to God that they'd be okay. It was very, very dangerous. And there was one incident where Russian missile actually went into a hospital,
Wow.
and that was one of the distribution points, yeah, into a hospital. And that's the problem with war, is that you can't guarantee anything in a war. There's crazy things happen all the time. And so a missile actually went into a hospital, and it happened to be at that time that was one of the distribution points for Food for Life, and there was a volunteer there, and he got hit. Shrapnel hit his leg, and he bled to death.
Oh,
And a few weeks later, they had a memorial ceremony for this volunteer because he was one of the local heroes. It was such an interesting situation in Chechnya because Chechnya was a Muslim country, and of course the volunteers were all Hare Krishna, Hindu, right? But
right.
it was very common when they would see the volunteers in the street, cars would stop, people would get out of their car and bow down to the volunteers and then get back in their car and drive off. They were
Wow.
so touched by
Wow.
what these volunteers were doing, and there was no other food relief organization in the city. Even the Red Cross would not dare to come into Chechnya. It was too dangerous. And yet there were Food for Life volunteers there for 2 years providing meals, the only free food service in the entire city for the next 2 years. They served over 2 million meals.
You
It was amazing.
mentioned something really interesting, Paul, about people, how they welcomed you, these Hindu volunteers in a Muslim country, particularly when they were in conflict, mostly because of their religious and ethnic affiliations, right? So I think it gives me, a more a perspective of a broader reconnaissance about how we are all in some way spiritually connected to each other, no matter what race, caste, creed, religion we come from. So how did you feel? I mean, at that point in life, I mean, when you were there, when people were dying, you mentioned.
Yeah, well, we saw this actually happen a lot. It is a good point because we saw this happen a lot where wherever we were at Food for Life, we tended to disarm or remove those barriers which were existing beforehand. It's like we came in there totally neutral, sharing food liberally, indiscriminately, and we were very respected for that. It didn't matter who saw us, whether it was Russians or Chechens or what side of the conflict. They respected us, and they saw us as something very unique, very, very special, and they had great respect. There was one other story, which is an amazing story, another war in 1993, and it was a war between the Abkhazians and the Georgians, and Georgia is actually a southern state of the former Soviet Union in Russia. It's like the Florida of Russia. It's where all the fruits and vegetables are grown. So there was a conflict there, and I actually went to that war zone I was there for a couple of weeks, and I heard later that when at some point in time the actual Paisians took over the city, and they came in guns ablaze and were just shooting everyone house to house, and they came across the home of the monks, where the monks were actually basing their Food for Life program because they were serving food all around the city. They were the only food relief in the entire city. And the Abkhazian soldiers were basically killing all the Georgians, and of course, because Russians were pro-Georgian, then if you're Russian, you're also going to get killed. So it was a very dangerous situation because here the monks were, and they're all Georgians and Russians, and they're stuck there, and all of a sudden now they're possibly going to be killed. And so these soldiers came to their house, they pulled them out of the house and says, okay, who are you? Basically trying to identify if they're Russian or Georgian or Abkhazian. And of course, they're all Russians and Georgians. The leader of the group, of the monks, was a Georgian. And he says, wait a minute, I need to explain what's going on here. We are actual monks. We are not taking on sides. We've been feeding people all this time. We're indiscriminately. We're spiritual people. We believe that we're all brothers and sisters. And he began preaching to this soldier, and this is a gunpoint. You can imagine.
Wow.
The other boys are like petrified. They're shaking and praying to Krishna and to Sringadev and thinking, oh my God, this is it, we're going to die. And of course, just before this, they're hearing gunshots and people being killed in the neighborhood.
Hmm.
So this boy, very bold, he's coming from a warrior background. Actually, he was he's I think his family was in the military. So he's very very strong, and he says, "No, no, wait, I need to explain." And he just very strongly, confidently explained to the soldier that we're all brothers and sisters, we're spirit, we're not this body. I mean, he's preaching Bhagavad Gita, and this soldier's like listening to him and hesitating and thinking, "Well, I've got my orders to kill you, but this sounds very interesting, so okay, continue." And so this conversation went on for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and already it was a miracle that it was, he was able to basically hold them off for that long. And then
Mhm.
I got down to the point where the soldier was frustrated and he was thinking, I don't know, this is ridiculous. And right at that point, a major general or a major in the army, a Parsian army, was walking by and he saw this scene and he says, wait, stop, don't kill these boys, they're okay. These
Hmm.
boys are okay, you can leave them alone. They're
Hmm.
good boys, they're just feeding people, they're okay, they're neutral. And the soldiers put down his guns. And later on, the volunteers found out that this major had actually had been fed by the volunteers in another country, and he had a good experience, and he knew about Food for Life, and he realized that we
Hmm.
were very neutral, very spiritual people. So it was quite
This is a
amazing.
wonderful story, actually.
Yeah. And how he identified with you even in such times of conflict, that basic human emotions like love and compassion, and that is what resonate with everyone, no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what the affiliations are. But that is, I think, what connects us, the whole entire humanity in this world. I think, Vivek, you would also have some interesting experience in terms of, because I know overseas volunteers for Better India, join hands with people coming from all caste, creed, everything. Before our current Prime Minister Narendra Modi, he ran for election, and you guys were working door to door as grassroots volunteers in India. So it's pretty incredible that how with our little things, how with our karma, we all come together. So Vivek, do you have something to say about the whole unity in diversity? In Of course, yoga is a space which brings all of us together. But if you would like to add something on it.
Yeah, so I think that yoga is definitely, if you see in the West, yoga is considered as one of the most one of the most spreading phenomena, actually, if I can say that. It's been grown from multi-folds, actually. I see everywhere there is a yoga studio and people are doing yoga.
Hmm.
I also spoke with them, asked about their specific, personal growth after they started doing yoga. They told me, in fact, myself and many of my friends also, that they felt more peaceful, they felt more grounded after doing yoga, they felt more humble, and very and a little bit connected with your soul, or with yourself. You will be able to clear-headed think something, and then this entire peace process. So that's why I think International Yoga Day is a wonderful initiative taken by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and 177 countries in United Nations supported this initiative. So this tells that this is one of the major landmark in the history, that all the countries are coming together. 177 countries coming together, supporting a yoga initiative, and they want to all be peaceful. In the end, this is the goal, to have peace, to have love, and no more fights. Had enough that kind of situation. So I would like to ask on the same regards to Paul, that how do you see the outreach of I would rephrase it. How do you think that the West is reacting to the yoga, to the ancient Sankhya yoga system, which is not just exercise, it's more towards a philosophical school, one of the philosophical school of the Bharatiya Darshana, the Indian philosophy and theology. So how do you think that that it would be that West is considering this entire yoga uh, in the modern world.
Well, yeah, you're right, and that's amazing. You mentioned 177 countries supported this initiative. I think that's probably a first. I can't imagine that so many countries would vote, positively for one initiative like that. That's amazing. That's more than a majority. That's incredible. So, yeah, it's good to see the expansion of yoga, the adoption of yoga in modern lifestyle. I mean, it's not uncommon now to see yoga being practiced in big corporate offices. I mean, the World Bank has, regular yoga sessions every day in different parts of the offices in Washington D.C. Um, However, what's happening is that in many cases, people are focusing on the very basic understanding of yoga, which is more of physical exercise. And of course, as I mentioned in the last talk, that's really just the beginning stages where you understand your body to be a holy temple. The human body is a very blessed thing. I mean, of all the 8,400,000 species of life, according to the Vedas, there are 8,400,000 species spread throughout the universe. And within that, there's only 400,000 human species. And so it's very, very rare. And on this planet alone, we're in the minority. I mean, there are more insects and animals and trees and so on in the world than human beings. So it's such a blessing to have a human form, and then to have a human form that is, healthy and intelligent, and nicely situated, and you have facility for education and comfortable. And I mean, it gets less and less. The chances of that become less and less. So it's such a blessing to have this opportunity. And yet people, when they take to yoga, they're not seeing the spiritual depth of what that means, and they're seeing it simply as another form of exercise, a superior form of exercise. But that really is just stage one, just the basic level. We have to get to the point where we honor the body fully as a temple, eating pure foods, having pure thoughts, controlling the senses, meditating, and in this way learning to find what our true self is, self-realization, understanding a higher nature as a soul, as the witness within this body, the host soul. That's important. And I feel like Food for Life and programs like ours are helping people to, to elevate their practice of yoga, because food is such an important part of our spiritual development, certainly an important part of the yoga development, as clearly defined by Patanjali, the author of the Yoga Sutras, who clearly states that ahimsa, an ahimsa lifestyle is essential on the yoga path, and so that includes what you eat, eating non-violent foods.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and now that explains why you are a food yogi, if I so to say. That kind of sums up.
Yeah.
And on that note, Paul, I know when you mentioned food, you talked about vegetarianism, and so you obviously refrain from eating animal meat. And I came to know that you and your wife primarily, she's running this Juliana Animal Shelter in Colombia. So what is the whole concept? And firstly, congratulations, because now you are not a solitary wandering monk anymore. You are in Garhastha, you got married, you fell in love, got married, and you have a family now. And then, so how is your wife and you're working towards this protecting animals and these issues about animal rights in Colombia?
Well, my wife, Juliana, is also an inspiration to me, because she actually was a volunteer for Food for Life at the age of 14. So
wow.
a very young girl. She realized the importance of this program, and she was a volunteer in Colombia. And so she's been doing Food for Life, for the last 20-odd years. And she took up this initiative to set up a sanctuary for animals, because she realized at a very young age, even before 14, at the age of 5 and 6, she became a vegetarian when she asked her mother, "Mother, what does a burger tree look like? A burger tree?" And her mother says, "Well, my dear, there's no burger tree. Burgers don't come from trees. And then her mother explained to her where a burger comes from. And at that point, she was so shocked. She thought, "Oh my God, I can't eat animals. I'm not going to eat animals ever again." So she became, of course, back then it wasn't even called vegetarian. I mean, there was no name for it back then. She
Mhm.
became a non-animal eating person. And then she had a vision as a young girl to open a sanctuary to give shelter to all the animals of the world. And so many years later, she realized that dream, and now I'm helping her with that. We co-founded Juliana's Animal Sanctuary. It's where we live. We have animals, protected cows, horses, and dogs, and so on. These are rescued animals.
Mhm.
And part of the reason behind that is not simply just to rescue animals, but also to teach by example that animals, like humans, have souls, and we're all spiritual brothers and sisters. As St. Francis very famously taught, that we're all brother, sun, sister, moon. We're all spiritual family. We're all part of one godly family. So
Mhm.
what Juliana is trying to teach through action is not only to respect all animals, not just dogs and cats, but all animals,
Mhm.
but to also give chance to interact with these animals. For example, a cow. We have a cow and we have a bull. A bullock, which is, this bull is at least 1,300 pounds. It's a massive animal. I mean, it's really, really big.
Mhm.
Its head alone probably weighs more than Juliana.
Wow.
And it's a very fearsome looking beast, but it's gentle like a kitten. I mean, you can
Mhm.
go up to this animal. We call uh, Balaram. We call the ox Balaram, which means great strength. And you can go up to him and you can scratch him and hug him, and he's just a big kitten and he purrs, and it's amazing. And so when people have this experience, they realize, oh my God, cows and bulls are such lovely, peaceful animals. Why would I want to eat them? So it's a very, very powerful, without even preaching to people to become a vegetarian. By the experience of interacting with these farm animals, people get the message that these animals are just like you and I. They're non-human animals. We're animals too. We're all animals.
Mhm.
And they deserve respect and love, and they have love to give us as well. So it's very beautiful. And so that's why I love this project, because it's very much in line with the objectives of Food for Life Global.
Hmm. Incredible. So, Vivek, did you have something to say about the animal project? I mean, is overseas Volunteers for Better India some way also promoting the philosophy of, uh, you know, protecting animals and all humankind in some way? I mean, do you have something aligned?
I think it is important that food, as we I think discussed this earlier, that when you are doing yoga, when you are on a spiritual path, it does matter what you eat. It does matter what your actions are. So everything comes in this cycle of karma, and then everything becomes a part and parcel of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to lead your spiritual path, I think it's very important for one to have control on the senses. And well, food is one of the things which we can sense. I guess we can taste it. So some people just go by the taste, that they just love eating meat and they can't stop it, that kind of thing. And the others just put more thought to it, that whether do I need it, or I mean, do I need it, and in terms of my alternative choices, and scientifically proven data is good for climate and stuff like that. So sustainability, some of these things are coming in, and especially in America, I'm seeing a lot of people going vegetarian. Especially those who are following the path of yoga. So,
Mm-hmm.
so this is a very important thing, that how food, yoga, and karma and bhakti, everything connects totally wonderfully.
For a holistic living, right? To our whole philosophical quest of living that ideal life and impacting and contributing to the betterment of the world
Right.
around us. So, what are your schedule? What does it look like for the International Day of Yoga on June 21st? What would you be doing, Vivek?
So basically, in DC, Indian Embassy is organizing a wonderful event out in National Mall in DC, the heart of DC, and we have partnered with several other local organizations. there were precursor events that happened in DC, Maryland, Virginia area, hosted by Indian Embassy and some of the temples associations. ISKCON is also a part of this yoga event. And beside this, OBVI is doing a 100 cities project. All the major cities in US. There are some projects, so there are some yoga events that are happening for June 21st. So it's a massive day. It's a massive event, and it's a wonderful day to come out together and say that this is at least one thing in this world which basically unites 177 countries, or if not unite, at least have this commonality that okay, we support this common idea of yoga. So I think this itself
And we
says.
adhere to that way of life, that holistic, finer living and philosophy.
Yeah, so I think the event is gonna be on full swing. There are OBVI is doing hangouts with webinars with different other people throughout India. Like they have Swami Chidanand ji, and then they have I think a few other hangouts scheduled, and some of them are already completed. So
Mhm.
these hangouts give us different viewpoints, different messages. So being in the DC area, embassy also invited Sri Ravi Shankar and
Mhm.
Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev from Isha Kriyas to come and speak on yoga, and they have given wonderful lectures on yoga. So I think I'm very hopeful for the event, and
Mhm.
June 21st would be one of those yoga days and this is just a starting. There is much more to come, I would say.
Absolutely. So, Paul, would you be with your wife Juliana on that day, or what does your day look like?
We haven't planned anything yet, but there's a possibility we could be there, but in DC. But I think we're probably going to be doing something locally here in South America. And this is an international event, so we're going to do something related to the sanctuary and do an
Mm-hmm.
event, on the sanctuary.
That's
Um,
great.
Wonderful.
Yep. So I think one of my last questions to Paul from my side would be that summarizing all the efforts that you have made in Food for Life Global, the span where Food for Life Global service and goes out around the world, 60 plus countries, serving 2 million meals a day, all vegetarian meals, fully nutritious with the standards of World Health Organization or some nutrition standards. That's wonderful effort. So from a journey as a yogi where you gave up, you become a monk at the age of 19, you mentioned. So from your journey as a yogi to a World Bank executive to the founder of major philanthropic organization, I think you have given up the cushy career, so to speak, in the service of humanity. So what basically keeps you going? What is that one motivation that keeps you going throughout from last so many years?
well, my inspiration comes from the founder of Food for Life, which is Swami Prabhupada, and he taught me at a very young age of something very profound, very simple but profound. And I mentioned this last time we spoke, that spiritual life begins with the tongue. Now I've changed that a little bit, and I usually say evolution of consciousness begins with the tongue, because the fact is, until we can control the tongue, our consciousness, our spiritual realizations cannot really flourish. And of course, the tongue has two functions, tasting and vibrating. So what you eat and what you speak have a very powerful impact on the development of your consciousness, your awareness, your spiritual awareness. So I've embraced that idea, and my dedication and my gratitude for Swami Prabhupada has motivated me all of these years. So even when I got an executive position at the World Bank and I was consulting there for 10 years and getting paid very well, I was actually still doing my Food for Life service. It was during that time in 2005 I was at the World Bank, and I got the call that I had to go to Sri Lanka
Hmm.
to head up the volunteer team, and there was about 50 volunteers, and we set up the kitchens around the island. And that was during my time. And at that particular time, I'd gotten a contract to work directly with the president of the World Bank, the secretarial office of the bank, and I was working on a special website It was a website for transition to the new president. So it was like, an educational website, and they specific and I took on that contract, and then the tsunami hit, and I was asked to leave. So I actually left the country and tried to do the work virtually, pretending that I was still in America. Saying, "Oh, I can't come to the meeting today because I'm in Sri Lanka."
Yeah.
And after about 2 or 3 weeks, they sort of realized that I can't come to any meetings, and I had to be honest and say, "Look, I'm in Sri Lanka. I'm actually heading up a volunteer team, and I'm doing this because this is really important. And I'm happy to do the work, but I have to do it from Sri Lanka." And they says, "Well, that's nice, but we need you to be here physically." And I actually lost that contract that particular time. So I worked in the World Bank for 10 years, from 2000 to 2010, but I continued my service with Food for Life, and then in 2010 I stopped working for the World Bank and focused solely on Food for Life Global and my food yoga service, which is more of a lifestyle, life coach, spiritual guidance service. And it's sort of the culmination of many years of meditation, many years of experience and wisdom working with Food for Life and studying the ancient Vedic culture of hospitality. And I realized that we need to teach this, understanding this spiritual philosophy of food to the general masses, something which we take for granted as being part of the Vedic culture, that food is a part of our spiritual development, and we have to have gratitude and respect and offer our food to God. That's something which we take for granted in the tradition, but it's something which is a little bit alien to most people. And so what I've tried to do in my book, Food Yoga, which was released in 2011, 2012, it's been re-released recently, the new edition, it's on Amazon. In Food Yoga, Nourishing Mind, Body and Soul, I'm trying to teach people this idea that food is a critical part of our yoga path, a critical part of our spiritual development. And we have to have gratitude and develop a spiritual relationship with our food, because it really is the key to our success. And it sounds very simplistic, but the proof is in the pudding. One can just put this to the test and experience it for themselves. If they change their attitude towards food and only eat pure food, which is non-violent, which is filled with loving intention, and only eat that type of food, and have a more respectful, loving relationship with nature, where food comes from, then they can have a really powerful transformation in consciousness. And I encourage people in my book, and I try to convince them through logic, through science, through so many different ways, why this is a good thing. And I'm hoping that people can embrace this idea of food yoga and become food yogis. Whether they're a Hindu, Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter. Anyone can be a food yogi. It's about realizing, that food is an important part of our spiritual development.
So, Paul, how do you for example, me sitting here in San Francisco Bay Area, how can I get engaged or involved with Food for Life Global?
Well, we have projects all over the world. Some are very, very big, like in India and different parts of Europe, and some are very small but very, very grassroots, but they're always looking for volunteers. I believe we do have something in San Francisco. People could go to our volunteer page on the Food for Life website, and they can apply for a volunteer position. We have an application form. They can put in their details, and then we can match them to a volunteer opportunity around the world. This is very common for people that are traveling. For example, they'll write to me and say, "Look, I'm traveling to Germany, or I'm traveling to India. I'd like to volunteer. Where can I volunteer?" And then I'll find out what cities they're going to, and then I'll we'll get them in contact with the local Food for Life volunteer coordinator for that area, and provide an opportunity for them. And most of our programs are free. You don't have to pay to be a volunteer usually, which is also very rare, because a lot of the times volunteer programs could be very expensive. You have to pay a lot of money to volunteer. Most of ours are free. We're willing to provide you an opportunity to volunteer and even feed you, which is another, added benefit.
Fantastic. That totally motivates me. Vivek, do you have something to say? I think we are coming to the end of the program,
Yeah,
so
I don't have any further questions. I would just want to thank Paul for his wonderful and vibrant talk today with us. And so, whenever I'm going to India, Paul, I'm getting in touch with you, and I'm gonna go to the Food for Life Center
Please,
to help
we
out.
definitely we definitely want to work with overseas volunteers for a better India. We're very inspired by what you guys are doing,
Mhm.
and we want to hold hands and see how we can collaborate. Whether that's providing opportunities for your people to volunteer at our programs, or to do some collaborative things. We put our heads together and create some new programs. We're happy to do that. Very enthusiastic, actually, and we're very happy also to be part of this yogathon. Thank you.
Thank you.
sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Vivek and Paul. Thank you for being with us today, and happy International Day of Yoga to both of you.
Thank you, Sumanjana.
Thank you, Paul. Nice to have you today.
Are you welcome? Namaste.
Namaste, Haribol.
Namaste.
Namaste.